those are deen.
Right.
That all of those are the way. Another meaning of deen, by the way, has to do with kind of like how you do things.
Hmm.
It's like
Right.
kamat dinu tudan.
Right.
As you do to others, it will be done to you. Um, so all of these fall into our relationship with God,
Right.
really. And so, but really, where things can kind of, where there's the space for such varying levels of experiences in the realm of the heart.
Right. And I want to talk about the heart next, but just to close up this notion of spirituality, religion, also what came up for me is if spirituality is about transcending the ego, polishing the ego, purifying. In other words, I'm not going to resist transformation just because I want to stay comfortable within my own nafs as it is,
Mm.
right? I mean, if you think about it, that's purification of the heart, that's
Yeah.
tazkiyat nafs, that's,
Yeah.
having akhlaq and adab. It's about aligning yourself to the way that the human being was meant to be,
Yeah,
essentially, right?
absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
we know we can be either these gorgeous creatures or, something much worse than even animals sometimes, right? Because
Absolutely.
animals don't have a choice to be what they are.
Best of
In
the
that
best or
sense.
the worst of the worst.
Subhanallah. So I mean, that's how I kind of see is like your spirituality. That's why there are people who can. Because one question I hear a lot, and maybe you've heard it too, is how come these people pray, or somebody in my family, or somebody else, like mashallah, lihya, kufi bisallu, or hijab, or whatever, and backbiting,
Mm.
abuse,
Mm.
constant criticism
Mm.
and judgment, weaponizing the religion
Oh
to
yeah.
get kids to do what they want, whatever it is, right? You have to listen to me, you're going to go to hell, or like, and of course we know that not all of this is allowed naturally, right? But it's fascinating because it can be that test. Don't make us a test for those that come after us. Like if we, the point here is the ripple effects,
Mm.
the snowball effect of
Mm.
everything we do
Mm.
has so much more impact than we know. And I feel like that's definitely a principle of spirituality,
Mm.
right? The butterfly effect, as they
Mm.
say, it's like, so, but this is, to me, it's almost like it shows a rupture of one's
Mm.
psychology and
It's a good word.
spirituality and religion, right? Because it's like religion is supposed to help in your spirituality. Your spirituality is going to naturally be it's the reflection of your psychology, so it's all going to influence each other. So does that suggest that your deen itself, or the way you're making meaning of it or practicing it, is lacking, and that's why it's not making that positive impact, or بتحسنك, improving you
Mm.
in your ihsan and
Mm.
your spirituality, psychology, akhlaq, right? Because isn't that supposed to naturally follow if that real nur of Allah and the hidayah of the Prophet ﷺ is impacting your heart?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think rupture is a really good word.
Mm.
That's a really good word for that. There's, I think, in such cases, and of course, there's varying levels that people struggle with different things. That's part of spirituality, right? Is that they'll make mistakes and they struggle and so on. But sometimes there truly is just a major rupture between the internal and the external.
Mm.
And I think that our guidance as relates to religion and spirituality and so on is to bring those two together, the internal and the external. So we have external rules and we have external practices, and they're supposed to be paired with internal realities.
Right.
So yeah, you can pray, but the prayer is supposed to be paired with this internal reality of concentration, of submission, of humility in front of God, of all of these type of things.
Yeah.
And if it's not there, then you're not going to get the result that is meant to be there. And that's, it's actually really clear in so much of the hadith. Because the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ will tell you things like, they don't believe if they don't love for their brother what they love for themselves.
Right.
They don't believe, let whoever believes in God in the last day speak well or remain silent. The signs of the hypocrite are the one who, if you get in an argument with them, they blow up. If they are given a trust, they break it. All of these are all character issues.
Yeah, signs, yeah.
They're all character issues. It's not like he didn't pray. Although
Right.
that's in different narrations as well.
Right.
But these are all part of the equation.
Yeah. So I mean, it almost sounds to me like it's fair to say that your character probably is going to suggest the most evidence as to your hal, perhaps,
Hmm.
regardless of what you're doing on the outside all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. They used to say that the person who's better than you in adab, in manners and character, is better than you in their spirituality. And some of the later scholars, they said, no, the entirety of the religion actually is manners and character.
Right.
If they're better than you in manners and character, they're better than you in the religion.
Interesting.
Who is the Prophet ﷺ other than the most beautiful person ever
Right.
in character
Inside and out.
manners? Yeah.
SubhanAllah.
So yeah, you have external rules, but those there even if you look at, for example, the 5 pillars, right? Shahada to the side, but if you look at the prayer is tanha an al-fahsha'i wal munkar. It prevents from evil and bad deeds, right? The fasting is a means by which you gain taqwa. You gain this awareness and consciousness of God, which is again relates to character and manners. The zakat, the charity, is a means by which you're purified.
Tazakki.
Yeah, tutahhirukum biha. That these are all there. The Hajj is a place where there's la rafatha wa la fusuqa wa la jidala fil Hajj. There's no bad character, there's no arguing, there's no corruption in Hajj. So all of them actually go back to this idea of purifying one's character.
Yeah. It's like Shahada is about let go of falsehood and bear witness to the truth. Salah is about let go of evil deeds and, promote the good. Zakat is about purify your wealth and help the misfortuned. And Hajj is about let go of your tribalism and ethnocentrism and come together and remember the one source that we came and will return to. I mean, there's just so much, wisdom,
there.
man. Yeah,
so much
subhanAllah.
there.
And every time I have an interview with somebody, I'm learning new insights about the deen, like concept. It's just beautiful, man. It's just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, there's no limit. And I feel like that's what should excite us. Like, let's seek the knowledge. Let's, take this path and do our best and trust that Allah is going to open the doors and help you understand things just because you desire it more than, watching 6 hours of Netflix every weekend or, making sure you're better than your sister or, your wife is hotter than your brothers or whatever ego,
Weirdo
garbage
stuff
and,
have,
stuff people are carrying, Allah guide us. So I'd love to turn in our last portion here to discussing a bit more about the heart as an organ of perception. This concept is central and integral to Islam, to ihsan, to Islamic psychology, and for some it might seem kind of still abstract. Like, how is the heart an organ of perception? How do because most of us feel like we are up here in our heads, like we're living behind these eyes and looking out through the windows right here, and so we always feel like we're kind of located up here, right? But we're not, I mean, being a Westerner, it's a lot more cerebral generally, so you're gonna feel more stuck there. But that's probably why a lot of people are also looking for those other integral practices and things, right? So can you tell us a bit more about how Allah talks about the heart in the Quran? I know there's different words. There's fu'ad, qalb, there's sidr, there's perhaps basira, I think, connected to the chest. So what are some of those terms and what do they indicate? Maybe you can start us off there with getting a ground of meaning.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, there are a lot of terms used, like you said. And they all relate to some sort of understanding that's happening inside. Like the ones you mentioned, there's sadr, which refers to the chest, technically speaking. There's qalb, that refers to the heart. There's fu'ad, that sometimes people will say refers to like the inner heart. There's the sir, that's even deeper than that, the secret that's deeper inside. There's the ruh, the spirit.
So there's these internal layers and depths that you're saying. Yeah.
But all of them in the end, the understanding is what you said, is that we don't only perceive with our minds. That's a really, really important concept in Islam. Yeah. And the big verse that's often quoted in that context is the verse about لا تعمل أبصار ولكن تعمل قلوب التي في الصدور. That it's not the eyes that go blind, rather it is the hearts and the chest that go blind. And that, and we realize that as a reality, that people, when, even on a practical day-to-day level, when the heart and the emotions are not in the right place, our perceptions all change.
Yeah.
We look at the same thing and see something completely different depending on what's going on with us internally. And so the idea is that when we are connected to God, that allows us to have, usually it will allow us to have more understanding of what's going on with ourselves internally, and we'll be able to understand things in a deeper way, in a more profound way.
Right.
And on top of that, maybe there's insights that the heart gets that the mind doesn't get.
Right.
And that's really tough, I think, for people to understand. But we're composed of a soul and of a body,
Yeah.
And sometimes the soul is getting information too. The Prophet ﷺ said, for example, "Taqu firasat al-mu'min li'annahu yanzuru bi nur Allah," that beware of the spiritual insight, I guess you could say, of the believer, because the believer is looking with the light of God.
SubhanAllah.
They understand things. I mean, it's really hard to explain, but sometimes you experience it. You sit in front of someone and they say things, you're like,
He's looking through me.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like maybe in some colloquial terms, it's like listening to your gut, your intuition. You know, we say things like, "Oh, this doesn't feel right," even though I have no rational explanation. I just don't feel comfortable around that person for some reason. Like, there's something you're picking up on. And when I was in grad school, I came across some research. There's an organization called the Heart Math Institute, which is actually located in California, and they focus on studying how the heart is an organ of perception scientifically. And one of the things that they've published was that they found approximately 50 or 60,000 neurons in the heart that communicate to the brain. And they also found that signals that the heart sends more signals to the brain than the other way around.
Interesting.
And that when the heart sends signals to the brain has to submit to its command. Whereas when the brain sends a command to the heart, it can actually not fulfill the signal or the the message being sent, right?
So like straight out of the revelation.
Yeah, like the brain might say, he's gonna take your wallet, freak out, and then it's telling the heart, increase heart rate, get adrenaline going, you're in danger, and then the heart's like, no, I know this guy, or no, relax, okay? Make excuses for him or something, right? And there's a lot of stories like this, but this so that this Heart Math Institute, and here's one of the main ones maybe that'll help people really see this besides kind of personal anecdotes, is the research shows, I think it was at least 100 people that they did this with. So picture you bring in random people, you look at a screen, you're told you're going to see random images appear every 3 seconds. Some are going to be pleasant, like gardens and moms kissing their gorgeous kids or what have you, and there's going to be ones that are very unpleasant, like a tiger eating out another animal's carcass, or somebody who's disheveled, or an accident, or something, right? The point here is that it's random from beauty to ugliness. And what they found, they're measuring the heart's response, like the different waves and electromagnetic energy that it releases, which signifies activity. So what they found was, you're staring at the screen, and the first image that comes up is like flowers, and your heart responds to beauty, right? And the more smooth your heart waves are, the more tranquil you are, and the more chaotic they are, the more you feel chaotic. That's why also when someone gets angry in a room, you feel the space change. So when they're looking at these pictures of these flowers, they found that like it switches. I'm at 1 Mississippi. By 2 Mississippi, my heart is going to chaos. And then by 3 Mississippi, the random image that comes next is something ugly and scary. In other words, they said, and this is still something everyone's scratching their heads around, the heart is perceiving things that's precognitive. In other words, they found, we're talking like almost 80% here, that every time your heart rate changed as if a negative image was about to come, it did, even though it was randomly simulated. Like, even the experimenters didn't know what image is coming next. So they were suggesting that the human being is tapping into knowledge or awareness or understanding precognitive, and there's layers of reality clearly that it's not just in your neurological sensory input necessarily, right? So that's like actual scientific publishing. You can find it on Heart Math Institute, and they've done other stuff since then too, which is really kind of, when I first learned about it almost 10 years ago, I was like, subhanallah. I immediately remembered the hadith of the Prophet about the heart, and of course the ayat of the Quran. So just thought I would drop that geeky footnote.
Oh, that's very fascinating.
Yeah.
Especially, like I've heard some people say, some scholars and stuff say, ideas of like the heart being the gateway to the soul. And the soul is old, right? Our souls are not, they're
Been
here way before our bodies are here. And our souls know God. And so you see, part of it is to discipline ourselves enough such that we can actually hear our hearts. And that's like the first, kind of like the foundation. This is usually where people stop in the spirituality of Islam. They call the whole thing tazkiyah, which is basically trying to purify the nafs enough, the soul, the base self enough, such that we can get past it and have some sort of relationship with the heart. But then now, what happens there is that, that's a different. Now we're getting into a whole level of experience and existence that relates to being connected with the soul and everything that the soul knows.
Yeah.
And if I had done that, if I had accomplished that level, then I'd be able to maybe say more, but I haven't. But that's what I hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very fascinating thing that you shared.
It's kind of like the mind can be almost like the inner chatter, and the heart is meant to be the inner voice, perhaps. Like there's that difference. Or, another way I kind of thought about it was like the mind itself, the brain has two hemispheres. So like there's a pair there. And Allah says we create everything in pairs, and that's how we understand fundamentally reality, science, laws, hot and cold, the whole spectrum of properties in the world. And it's like maybe the mind is more meant to process duality and understand that aspect of reality, whereas maybe the heart is designed to perceive unicity, and oneness. And that's why you won't ever see that if you're only staying here and you never go down or whole, right? Perhaps because why does Allah say those things about the you may have seen and heard with these senses, but you're actually blind or deaf or whatever it is. You
didn't really perceive.
Right. So there is obviously something more there than just a pleasant allegory, right?
Yeah, there's something profoundly beautiful there, I think. I don't know how to talk about it, but that's really remarkable. SubhanAllah. There's something there for sure. Wow. It's the heart is really something.
Yeah.
I want to look up that research, just to get an idea, to see more of what they've done.
Yeah, totally. I'll put some links in the description of the show. They have some YouTube videos and stuff too, and there's a TED Talk once with a guy from HeartMath, and he did a demonstration on stage about like showing the power of the heart. In other words, they're trying to show like the heart isn't just some Valentine's Day symbol that pumps blood and that's it. It's like no, actually, it's an amazing organ. It has a self-generating electrical pulse that pumps blood and cleans and does everything for you. I mean, if your blood wasn't flowing, you'd be finished, right? It's that life force. Everything comes from there, right? And there's nothing, to my knowledge, in the heart that there's a switch for it, right? Just like the brain, there's no region of the brain. There's regions of the brain that is responsible for learning and memory and logical thinking and visual cortex in the back and somatic movement, this and that. But there's no part of the brain that is specially designated for telling the rest of the brain what to do. Right? There's no control center. It just does what it does. It gets stuff in and it sends it out. It does it. So what's telling the brain to do what it does? Right? How is it choosing which signals or not to stop or block or send? And even down to the neurology of the brain, Sheikh Jamal, your neurons actually even organize efficiency in the biochemical signals being sent like every 1/100th of a second constantly. It actually has multiple options happening on a neurological level